The Social Security Expansion Act. Did it pass, or where did it go? That's a great question and exactly what we're going to talk about right here in the video, so let's get right into it. All right, now in this video, we're specifically talking about the Social Security Expansion Act, which is a popular piece of legislation that would reform Social Security in a major way, including raising benefits by thousands of dollars per year for millions of beneficiaries. It would change the way that the annual cost of living adjustment is calculated. It would also increase the minimum benefit for millions of beneficiaries, and it would push out insolvency out until the end of the century. But what happened to it? Did Congress finally pass this legislation? That's what we're going to talk about right here in the video. Let's get right into it. However, really fast before we do, thanks so much for joining me. If you're new here or if you haven't done so yet, please make sure to subscribe right down below the video, as it's totally free to do so. And I'm here for you, right by your side each and every day, watching the latest details hitting the wire, doing the research and breaking it all down into these short videos so you can stay posted on what's actually going on and anything popping up out there you can possibly grab and or take advantage of. So again, please remember, I'm here for you no matter what every single day. That's my promise, and as always, I'm sticking to it. So again, please subscribe down below if you haven't done so yet, and let's get into it and talk about the Social Security Expansion Act. Where is this legislation, and did Congress forget about it? Did they pass it? Where do we currently stand? What is going on with this? Just like so many other pieces of legislation that have been out there in Congress that they've introduced here over the last couple years, especially the last year or so, even the last 6 to 9 months, we've seen a ton of pieces of legislation hitting the table in Congress. What happened to all of them? Did they do anything with these? Are they still piled up on somebody's desk? Did they throw them into the burn pile? What happened to all these? Great questions. Let's talk through what's going on here. All right, so like I said, I only want to focus on the Social Security Expansion Act. Now, this is the one that was introduced by Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and other Democratic friends in the Senate, okay? So this is the one that they reintroduced. It was back in about June of 2022. So, you know, it's quite a while ago, but this is the one that Bernie Sanders has had private meetings with the president talking about. Well, why would he be doing that? First off, Bernie Sanders is very much sold on this Social Security Expansion Act. He really believes in this, and again, that's totally fine. It is his piece of legislation, along with some of the other lawmakers out there. Again, according to Bernie Sanders and what he believes, this would change Social Security, it would reform benefits, it would raise taxes on higher income individuals, a whole variety of other things like this, and he finds that this is the solution to reform Social Security for a long time into the future and make sure that beneficiaries are, more financially taken care of, especially as I mentioned earlier, this would increase benefits by thousands of dollars per year and would also increase the minimum benefit for millions upon millions of beneficiaries. Not bad. Sounds pretty good, right? Not only that, let me point this out. It would also change the way that the annual cost of living adjustment is calculated. In fact, we've seen this one in a variety of other proposals that are out there in Congress that we've seen here over the last couple of years, the last year, the last 6 to 9 months or so. We've seen this popping up a ton, which is they want to change the way the COLA is calculated from the CPIW to the CPIE. I've talked about that a bunch of times in other videos, so I probably don't need to go into a ton of detail about that here in this one, but you probably know the details about that, okay? Basically, what it would do is it would increase the COLA a little bit more each and every year to better reflect real expenses for fixed income beneficiaries aged 62 and older. That is what that's calculated off. So it just basically gives a higher weighting into the actual real expenses of fixed income beneficiaries. But let's talk. What happened? The Social Security Expansion Act. Where is it, right? Well, here's what's going on with this. Oh, by the way, I'm going to throw this out there. I know that I've said this a couple times, but I said that this would increase benefits by thousands of dollars per year for beneficiaries. This is the piece of legislation that has the $200 per month increase for millions of beneficiaries, okay? This is the one. It's called the Social Security Expansion Act. But anyway, did it actually pass through Congress yet? The simple answer is no. Unfortunately, it has not passed through Congress yet. However, there's a few different pieces of legislation that we've come across here over the last, I'm going to say like 2 years, year and a half or so. There's been a lot of these that have come out. I would say, in my honest opinion, with all of them that have come out, we've seen a ton of them. They've had their 15 minutes of fame, and then they just disappeared like we've seen with so many, other things that have gone on in the history of this country and the history of the world. Not just legislation, but like people that are famous for like 15 minutes or things like this, right? So we've seen a lot of legislation like this over the last couple of years that comes out swinging, sounds really cool, really great, and it gets a little bit of reaction, it gets a little bit of publicity, and then sure enough, it just goes away and we never hear about it again, right? We've seen that a ton. But I would say, in my honest opinion, the Social Security Expansion Act, as well as the Social Security 2100 and the SSI Restoration Act, these three pieces of legislation seem pretty promising. But just because they seem promising doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot, right? We've seen this before with other legislation. We've seen this before with a lot of other things out there. Just because it looks good, just because it passed all the tests, just because it checks all the boxes, does not mean that Congress does anything about it, right? So, just want to make that very clear. But this is a pretty good one. Now, again, are all the provisions in there perfect? No, but it's just like every piece of legislation that's out there. Nothing is perfect with its first iteration, which is why they come back, they talk about the details, they negotiate out all the details, they talk about all of it, they add more things, they take some things away, they adjust different provisions within it, and then they eventually hone it all down so that it looks pretty nice, right? That's what the end of the day, right? It's like, well, I was going to use a weird analogy, but I'll say it anyway. This is a totally weird analogy. It's like going to a sawmill, right? You see all the raw logs come in, right? They take the sawmill and they chop them down into raw, cut 2x4s. And then they go through all the machines and things like this. And then before you know it, it gets shaved down. It comes out a nice, perfectly sanded and really nice looking 2x4. Rather than a rough cut, it's a nice, perfectly one, right? It's just like the same analogy with legislation. And again, I know, super weird analogy, but literally as I was talking, that was the analogy that popped in my mind. So I thought, really? Are we going down this road here talking about like logs and rough cut 2x4s and stuff? But that's the analogy that I thought of. So I thought, you know what, let's just roll with it. Let's talk about it, okay? But anyway, my point is, it's the same thing with legislation. It comes out with its first initial introduction as the rough cut 2x4. It'll work. It's not great. It's all bumpy and jagged and there's splinters everywhere. Not a great looking thing. But eventually it gets all, sanded down, looks perfect, and then it's ready to be sold or used or, whatever, things like that. So my point is, long story short, I have seen some people asking down below in the comment section, as well as I've been asking myself, where did it go? What happened with the Social Security Expansion Act? Just like so many pieces of legislation that we've seen here over the last couple of years, it pops out, sounds really cool, sounds great, it's exciting, we're all getting jacked up, waiting for them to pass it, because it sounds pretty good, right? Remember, politicians are just salespeople, right? They're salespeople with an attitude, right? I mean, let's just be real for a second. That's basically what they are. They're really, kind of grumpy salespeople is basically what politicians are. If they don't get their way, they go cry in a corner or something, and then they yell at each other and pretend like, the other side is the worst or whatever. But my point is, we basically know that they come out and they make things sound really, really good, right? That's their whole objective. They have to sell their legislation to the other people in their party, as well as the other people on the other side of the aisle. You know what I mean? So that is the whole piece, the whole detail with basically Congress, lawmakers, things like this. So anyway, long story short, I've been wondering too the same exact thing. What happened to it? Did they secretly pass it and nobody knew about it? Unfortunately, this is just another one of those like we've seen so many times before. It's sitting on the shelf of somebody's office or maybe in a drawer or something like that, and it's being aged, right? They're aging the legislation here, right? They're aging the proposal. Just like the big barrels of, I don't know anything about this stuff, but like the big barrels of wine or whatever, right? You put it in the barrel, you set it aside for 20 years, and you pull it out someday, and it's supposed to be good or something. I don't know. I don't know anything about that stuff, but my point is, kind of the same thing here, right? They're like basically aging the legislation. They're basically just letting it sit there, putting it in some time, and then eventually when it becomes a more urgent issue, then they're going to pull it out and say, well, let's kind of work on this thing. However, Bernie Sanders, again, he will continue talking about this. Now, to be fair, as of recently, I haven't heard him talk about it in a little while here, but every so often, it's interesting about Bernie. He's like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. I'm not really sure what a good analogy would be, but he's like one of these things, right? You don't hear about him, don't hear about him, don't hear about him, and then all of a sudden, there's Bernie. He's making a big old ruckus about something, right? He's out there rattling the cage, he's making all kinds of noise, he's making a big scene about something. And then we're like, oh, there he is. There's Bernie. I haven't seen him in a little while, but good to know he's out there doing his thing again, right? So that's kind of what goes on with Bernie, but I wouldn't be shocked again to see him come out and try to resell this thing yet again, because that's kind of his deal, right? This is his piece of legislation. Just like Medicare for all, that was his big thing, like, what was it? I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago or something like that. Again, maybe I'm off by a year or something like that. But either way, maybe it was a year, maybe it was 2 years ago. I'm not really sure. But we talked about it a lot at the time. But Bernie Sanders, Medicare for all and Medicare expansion, remember that whole thing? Bernie was like all over that, right? So that was his big thing for a while. And then when he realized, oh, it's just not going to pass right now, he kind of moved on to the next big thing, which actually the Social Security Expansion Act. So anyway, long story short, nope, unfortunately, it's not passed yet. But as I mentioned before in other videos, I want to say this really quickly, and then I'm going to let you go, which is they're kind of going through the details of a lot of these pieces of legislation out there, and they're cherry picking a lot of the different provisions within them. Some of the really good ones, they're cherry picking out, and a lot of times they're being introduced as standalone bills, or maybe they're all being packaged up as their own other bill with basically the best provisions of all of them combined. Does it kind of make sense? So anyway, of course, as I do get more details on any of this, I'll bring it to your attention right away. Want to give you a quick update on this. Just like you, I continue to ask myself, where are they? Where's the Social Security Expansion Act? Where are all these other proposals that we've seen? A ton of them here over the last year and a half, 2 years or so. We've seen a lot of them. Maybe, I'm going to go out here and guess. I'm going to say maybe 20, 25, maybe 30. I don't think it's quite 30, but I would say without a doubt, probably 20 to 25 of them we've easily seen here over the last couple years come out talking about Social Security. Maybe it's more than that. I'm not really sure. There's a lot, though. I do know that for sure. We've talked about all of them here on the channel. Anyway, I'm here for you in any way that I can be. Please make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't done so yet. Share the video with your friends, family, social media, and go back and check out any of the other thousands of videos here on the channel. Until next time, enjoy your day. Have a good one. Take care, and catch you guys.